Well, this is the day that we've been building up to for months. The gift giving, the planning, the cooking, the parties. It is Christmas Day, said to be one of the warmest, most meaningful days of the year. It's a time to be generous and remember those on the margins of our communities. And who better to speak to on this day than someone who is known for his passion to give presents and friendship to those very people. And to inspire us to do the same, Tim Huff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you joined us. And we're talking about your book, which is kind of Christmassy, kind of not. So it's a bit of a contradiction. You wrote this book to inspire us to know the meaning of the season, but not to keep it just in the season.
That's exactly right.
Tell me why, what inspired you? What was the spark that started this book?
The byline, the subtitle of the book is Cause for Perpetual Comfort and Joy. And I love the discussion of comfort and joy at Christmas, but I can't think of a season in my own life or in the presence of family, friends, or the people I've been among in the margins that people aren't longing for comfort. And I don't mean to be comfortable. I mean to receive comfort for their brokenness or brokenheartedness, things like that, and joy, to actually find joy. So to enter in at Christmas to the discussion where the words comfort and joy are already in play and say we need to take them far past Boxing Day and still be investigating that conversation. So
I think it's a great challenge as we're looking ahead to a new year here and thinking about what that might mean. But, you know, even in these Christmassy times when we're talking about comfort and joy, we're not always seeing that. You know, you worked at you worked selling evergreen trees and you saw that Norman Rockwell Little Christmas families coming and having this great experience with their kids. And then you saw like the self-entitled, cranky, bossy, mean people come as well, right?
I'm sure the people, the viewers who are watching who work in retail, I mean, they have their stories to tell that just like they had to flick a switch off to go back home and feel Christmas again because it was so difficult, the contrast.
I feel like in a way, like I personally have to fight to keep the meaning of Christmas in Christmas, you know, because sometimes I just get so overwhelmed by where the culture is headed with it. And it's like, I have to remind myself, what is this really all about? I have to fight it almost. Do you find that?
Yeah, I hate to over spiritualize things, so I'm not always good at this, but working on this book, I was better because my head was in the game all the time. You come back to Emmanuel, God with us, and you might be sitting in a parking lot of a busy mall or something and just go, try to say it loud, Emmanuel, God with us. Okay, how do I contextualize that for here right now? Or for people at home today who are lonely or sad, or people on the streets who are homeless, or people who are struggling with a recent death of someone, and this is, the sentiments are higher and the brokenheartedness is there, to kind of return to this place of God with us, though. Like at the core of this is the wonder of God with us, and that's where the comfort and the joy are going to come into play.
And we need that because, our Christmases aren't always that perfect Christmas that we hear about, often are not, and yet people let us down. Sometimes we're alone, but God never leaves us.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes people don't want to hear about other people's great Christmases. I mean, how many people are waiting for this season to this day to be over, so things can go back to everything else. They don't have to be reminded of their lack or their loss or whatever they're feeling, which is terribly sad. I mean, the book kind of approaches this idea. There's Greg Paul writes a portion in there, writes a piece there on joy. What does actually joy mean? Well, Greg has worked on the streets for 30 years with people who you might think are struggling with joy. And Steve Bell, a great singer-songwriter, my dear friend, writes about comfort. His first album was Comfort My People. When he felt commissioned to go into his ministry as a singer-songwriter, he felt God telling him, this is your commission, is to comfort my people. Steve's a healer that way. So to enter again into these words and to invite people to participate that. And the discussion guide at the end is actually set that someone who celebrates Christmas to no end could enter into it, and someone who struggles on this day to find the meaning of Christmas might go into the reflection part and say, there's something here for me too.
I love what you've done on many Christmas Eves and Christmas days when everything's closed and it's kind of like urban centers are cleared of people, except for people on the streets. They're still there. And you've gone out dressed as Santa. You've met them, and many of those people think that you are Santa.
Yes.
But you made a great observation about them, is that every single person, you said 100% of people you talked to went back to a time where they remembered when they were cherished.
Cherished.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a cycle. I do these backyard visits for Santa Claus for different children in my family's life. I've been doing it since my kids were wee. Now they're young adults. But there's this timeline in the middle where I had time to go downtown, so I was already in a Santa outfit, and would meet with homeless people because I've been down there for many decades. And you'd find that you were among people who were particularly intoxicated or struggling with severe mental illness. A lot of some of the other homeless people had found shelters, places to be, couch surfing, place like that. So a lot of people were extra lost with their abilities to think straight and stuff like that. But when all the facade is off, when all the ego is off, when there's no pride in like trying to impress or anything, they all talk about a time they were cherished with this Santa figure who they actually believe I am at that point in time, and somehow supernatural and someone they can trust with everything they're saying. They'll talk about when sitting on a grandpa's knee while he plays Christmas carols, or the smell of their mom's baked cookies when they were little, or getting a gift they couldn't imagine getting, and here now they're on the streets. But we all go back to a place where we were cherished. Like that's, if you think about it, your best Christmas, it's most likely one where you felt cherished in the center of it, or had the opportunity to cherish other people. That's really what the day comes down to, if you want to celebrate well, is to cherish those around you.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of us don't understand about poverty, you know, and I've heard this from so many different people. It's not really just about like not having food and not having shelter. Some of the biggest poverty is poverty of spirit, not having community, not being seen, not no one knowing your name, no one knowing your story.
Being forgotten. I think I say in the book, when we're talking about Joseph a bit, and talk about, you know, him being the forgotten man at Christmas in the nativity story many times. But
It's true.
That
Joseph who?
Yeah, exactly. I talk about a time when I was invited to be into a pageant, and the last two roles were the cow and Joseph, and I chose the cow role because he had more lines and a better costume. I mean, and
Cow.
and so the whole idea that, you know, the idea of being forgotten, though, when we take it to us, that we're forgotten, that there might be people viewing it today who feel forgotten. It's one of the great things that Huntley Street and this show does is remind people you're not forgotten. You know, we're sincere when we ask you to call in for prayer, or when we want to provide broadcasting that touches your heart. Like, whoever you are alone in this moment, we're working hard that you know you're not forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Because none of us are able to escape the I don't know, like the experience of loneliness. Happens to all of us, married, single, with family, without. There are just times in your life that you're going to feel misunderstood, abandoned, rejected, and alone. You know, and so we've all had to cross that chasm sometimes between that feeling and the knowledge that God is here with us, and the reality of that. You know, it's like, yeah, I know the Bible says it, but I don't always feel it.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us, especially after this busy time, after we're all peopled out, some people, they want alone time now, right? But nobody wants loneliness.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between seeking out your alone time, your quiet time, and actually being lonely. And we Christmas, you know, in the book, I actually wrote the last line first, but it ended up as the last line of the book. We Christmas best, so making Christmas a verb, when we Christmas always. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we would come to people when they're lonely. We would somehow be present when they're lonely. We'd be mindful of them. That's when we Christmas best, is when we keep entering into that idea of cherishing and not forgetting and being present.
I love that, you know, and it's such a great challenge, but I think it's also, it's a tough thing to know how to do it. You know, you talk in the book a lot, like you spend a lot of time just guessing what God's doing and just trying to respond, right? But it's like the people on the margins, the solutions are not simple. It's not just giving them a sandwich every day or giving them an apartment. Like it's more complex than that. How do I, the average person, enter into that?
Yeah, you know, I have spent almost 3 decades in the ministry of guesswork. I have friends and people, I hear their testimonies, they see words written for them and they hear voices telling them what to do and stuff, and I'm always like, wow, God, I think this is a good idea. I think this is the right thing. I think when we just enter in this idea of the Yuletide factor, is this feeling we have at Christmas, this spirit of like, I should do something extra. I should do something more. I should take that extra. I should chance telling someone I care deeply or showing them. that little Yuletide factor we have now is the one to carry around with us. That when today, if you think there's someone you should call and it's been weighing on you, that you say, now it's time to stop thinking about it. Now it's time to call. If there's a gift to give, if there's a homeless person at the corner of your work, maybe next week when you're back at work, this is the day to actually stop and engage that person instead of just thinking, oh, I should, or maybe I will, or sometime I will.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I interviewed a man recently, a young man, John Ing, who spent a couple weeks homeless on the street because he wanted to understand that experience. And like you said, his biggest thing was that nobody saw him. He became invisible overnight.
Ignored.
He went from being visible to invisible. And he said the hardest thing was that he went to visit all kinds of shelters and programs and Christian ministries. He wanted to see what it was like. And he said, we are like a conveyor belt of goods. But what he was really longing for was to be seen and to have community.
That's right.
And that's it, right? It's not just about buying a sandwich, which sometimes we struggle with, like, are we helping, are we hurting if we give money? But it's actually just about sometimes just listening, just being present.
And these principles applying to not just this season of Advent, but for us to say, I mean, my real hope written on the back of the book is that people maybe decide to read it in February or August, and that's not about selling the book, that's about saying, these principles still apply. They're not just December thoughts and feelings and ideas.
Love it. It's such beautiful thoughts on this day. Thank you so much, Tim,
Thank
for
you.
coming
Thanks,
in.
Cheryl.
We could talk forever. Well, if you're watching this and any of this hit home to you, if you're the person who's feeling kind of lonely today, or you're feeling challenged to reach out to someone who is lonely, I hope that you've heard these words. I hope that they inspire you to do something today. And maybe if you're that lonely person, maybe it's reaching out to another person who doesn't have anyone on this day. Who knows what God can do if we take that step of faith?